So what I mean by divisive is that the community simply can't agree on the quality of the bosses. A lot of people like them, a lot of people don't like them, and I'll go over 10 of the most extreme cases and try my best to explain both sides, and then give my own opinion at the end. So let's get started. Number 10, Sister Frida. I think some of the disappointment for this boss comes from just the DLC itself. The DLC didn't have enough content in it. It had only 2 bosses and the other one most people find mediocre at best. So it all came down to Frida to carry the DLC. And did she? Well, that's arguable. On one hand, it's a beefy fight, it has 3 phases, lots of interesting mechanics. I would say it's like a boss and a half. But on the other hand, it can get tedious to fight this boss when you're trying to get better at phase 3, but still have to go through 2 entirely different fights to get there. There's also some people debating if this boss is original enough or not, with the invisibility mechanic being similar to Priscilla from Dark Souls 1, phase 2 seeming like another attempt at Ornstein and Smough, and phase 3 sharing similar looking animations to Lady Maria from Bloodborne. Also, she's very easy to stagger and backstab. So I can definitely see why this boss has divided some people, but as for myself, I think it's a great fight, even though the DLC itself isn't completely redeemed by her. Number 9, Micolash, Host of the Nightmare. Yes, I know, most of you probably think this boss is trash, but I know a fair few people who would argue otherwise. Especially on my Discord server, such as Mayo who argued this. He's unique and interesting, his dialogue is fun and the boss area is whack. It isn't a good fight, but it's a fun experience. I just love how balls to the walls insane he is. While those are fair points, a lot of people find this fight just annoying, especially the AoE explosion he can do at the end of the fight. Meaning, if you die to it, you have to do the entire thing again. And chasing him around the rooms can get tedious after a while. And I'm more leaning towards being negative myself. I find Micolash quite meh, but I used to somewhat like this boss. I think the atmosphere and all is great, but after the first few playthroughs this fight gets pretty annoying. Number 8, Yhorm the Vacuous Spider. Another boss I think most hate, but again, it has quite a few defenders that think it's at the very least alright. Visually it's stunning, the design of the spider itself is cool, it's definitely an improvement on the Phalanx fight from Demon Souls, and it marks one of the trippier moments of the game. But then there are those who don't enjoy Yhorm as a fight. Whack spiders, whack Yhorm, now whack spiders and occasionally run around even more to avoid projectiles. Whack Yhorm, whack spiders, while also having to wait for Yhorm to finish his physical attack since it makes his whole body a hitbox. It's mostly a waiting game. Personally for me, the biggest flaw of this boss is the repetition. Killing the spiders once is fine, killing them twice is okay, killing them 3 times is just too much. So I'm not a huge fan of this boss myself, but I can see some of its redeeming qualities. Number 7, Darkeater Midir. Midir is one of the funniest cases on this list. Back when the Ringed City DLC first came out, people were furious about this fight, because they fought it in a less than ideal way. You're quite clearly meant to hit the boss in the head, but a lot of people were determined to defeat the boss by other means, such as whacking its legs and tail, which are much more resistant to damage. This gave the illusion of the boss having an unfair amount of health, which made it disliked by many. It didn't help that a guide was made soon after the release of the DLC that encouraged this method of fighting the boss. So just scrolling through the comment section of that video is quite funny, but also infuriating because I don't think it's fair to criticize the boss when you're doing it wrong. But there are still those who did the fight right and still don't really like the boss. The most common complaints are that the boss has too many abilities that just waste your time, and phase 2 doesn't change enough and thus the fight becomes boring. I agree with these complaints to a very lesser extent. I see them more as little nitpicks than major drawbacks, because I think Midir is fantastic. The music and the visuals are amazing, and it's just a fun fight for me and many others. Number 6, Kalameet. Another controversial dragon. Meet Kalameet. I honestly can't say much for why people hate this boss, but I know some do, and I think it mainly comes down to the hitboxes being sometimes bullshit. But I don't think that's big enough of a deal for me to not like the boss. While it's outclassed by Midir in pretty much every aspect, I think this is a fun, intense boss fight. And it's just badass fighting a goddamn dragon, or a wyvern. Look, I don't give a shit, it's a flying reptile. But maybe if I had done Soul Level 1 playthrough or something, I would mind the hitboxes more. Let me know in the comments if you're a Kalameet hater though. I would like to hear more on this. Number 5, Aldrich. or more endearingly dubbed Aldrich. I think I see as many people liking Aldrich as I do see them hating it. It's like 50-50. Let's look at what people in my Discord have to say. I'm really not a fan of the Aldrich fight, kinda a pushover for a late game fight. I quite like Aldrich. I hate him because of the stupid arrows. Yeah, I don't understand what everyone has against Aldrich. It's a fun fight that has mechanics other bosses don't have, like some of the magic attacks. Solid 7.5 out of 10. I find Aldrich quite good myself. Not amazing, but far from bad. The only annoying aspect is the arrows in phase 2, but other than that, I like it. Number 4, Burnt Ivory King. Again, pretty much half the community hates this boss and the other half loves it. The annoyance comes mostly from the huge gank before the fight against Ivory King himself. You can get a team of your own, but it requires exploring every corner of the area before the boss, and even when you do have all of them, the enemies tend to fixate on you alone. And when you get to the boss himself, he's actually pretty mediocre in terms of moveset. Sure, the sword looks cool, but that's about it. But speaking of looking cool, that's where the praise for this fight comes from. It's cool to drop down to hell itself, it's cool to have a group fight, it's cool to have the Ivory King step in from the gates of hell, it's cool how his sword lights up like a lightsaber. But for me this isn't enough to make this fight good. I don't like it. Number 3, Yhorm the Giant. Poor old Yhorm tried to look so cool in all the cinematics, but then turned out to be one of the easiest bosses in the game. And it's one of the main reasons why so many dislike him. Like Burnt Ivory King, he's all about looking cool, and he definitely succeeds in that. But he doesn't really succeed in being a clever gimmick boss. But even though I don't like Ivory King, I do kind of like Yhorm. Not a lot, but the fight doesn't waste my time in any way. It's decently fun and the music is great. But at least we can all agree that the Divine Dragon from Sekiro is a successful attempt at a boss all about spectacle. Number 2, Laurence the First Vicar. Larry from Bloodborne often gets a bad rap for numerous reasons. Firstly, he's a reskin. People don't like those. Secondly, he's difficult. Very difficult. In fact, many think he's too difficult, and for the wrong reasons, such as doing insane amounts of damage and having huge hitboxes. But he also has some of the best lore and music in the entire series, and while he is a reskin, the new additions to this fight make you fight him in a completely different way from Cleric Beast. And I myself am a fan of this fight. I don't think it's one of the best in the series, but I always enjoy my time with Laurence. Number 1, Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. And Gwyn just had to be number 1. It's such a debated boss, I made a video entirely dedicated on that subject. But let me explain why so many love it. The piano music, the lore, the setting, the brutal aggression from the boss, all made for a memorable finale to a game many are nostalgic about. I can't deny those are positive aspects of the fight, but I myself find the aggression too much. And if you parry him, he's a pushover. If you don't parry him, you become the pushover. It's a shit show no matter how you approach the fight. But that's it for this video. Let me know how you feel about each boss down in the comments or in my Discord server. And thanks for watching. See ya!